Okay, so welcome to another rendition of Road to Recovery. Today we are here with Anna Chavez. She is the General Manager of Servcorp China and Southeast Asia. So we're really excited to speak with her today. Servcorp is the world's best serviced offices and virtual offices and co-working. Very large company, one of the biggest players and one of the first players in the co-working industry. So we're really interested to hear their perspective on what's going on and to have Anna here today. Anna, you're 9 hours ahead of us right now, but you're also ahead of us when it comes to what's been happening right now in the coronavirus crisis. So maybe you can speak to that a little bit, speak about the countries you're covering and the different stages that they're at this time.
Okay, yeah, that's a good starting point. I think it's really interesting because nothing's independent with globalization. So though China's kind of on the other side of it, there are a lot of ramifications in terms of potential inquiries who are unable to get into the country now, or decision makers in Europe or the US who are focusing on other operational challenges. So although China is business as usual, I still think everyone's coming into work and we've got customers on the floor, although in limited numbers. I'm finding that conversion is quite low. It's a lot of research and a lot of kind of putting plans in place, but very difficult to get a firm start date at the moment in China. The other challenge we find is, for instance, if I'm putting on more team or new team, I can't send people from different cities to train new team, and our training and our customer service and staff experience is very, very important part of what we do, because happy team, happy clients essentially, and also it's one of our unique selling propositions in the market. So that's kind of a challenge that we're facing in China. We have had some sales literally towards the end of this month in China for pretty much the first time in about 3 months. Traditionally, it is a very, so I'll just put this on D&D. It is a very slow time of month leading up to Chinese New Year, and we expect that. And then as soon as you come out into the new year, everything picks up and it's the busiest time of the year. But because of COVID, none of that actually happened, and it was just extended and extended. So I think now and into April, we'll start to see things pick up and to get a little bit more confirmation of agreements and start dates. But yeah, it has been quite challenging. Mm-hmm. So that's China essentially. Singapore has been surprisingly great for us in the last couple of months. I think from a government and a management perspective, they're very good at controlling the spread and managing the self-isolation and quarantine guidelines, just as China was. So I think it will clear up quite quickly. Malaysia is in shutdown, mm-hmm. and we think that will be extended until the end of at least next month. At the moment, it finishes 14th, and Thailand is kind of on a semi-closure. So our offices and co-working spaces and team are all still operational, but limited usage on the floors where people are choosing to work from home. With KL, we have 3 floors there, and because we have the team and technology aspect of our business offering for our co-working virtual and office clients, we were able to overnight, once they announced the closure of non-essential offices, get the equipment and the Wi-Fi or the internet requirements for our corporate receptionists, and actually send home our switchboard to their dining rooms or whatever they have in their house. Oh, wow. And set them up. So our clients' calls can still be managed and handled and transferred in their company name, despite the fact that our team are all bunkered down working from home. So I think we do have an opportunity, though we have a challenge when it comes to physical space usage, to leverage off our virtual office product and support companies with the technology that they need in this time that they can't get otherwise. So that's kind of the good side.
And no, that sounds amazing. But For me, it sounds like you guys were a little bit prepared, and this was something I wanted to ask you about. So I'm not sure how long you've been with Servcorp, but Asia, and especially China, speaking to China, they are very prepared for scenarios like this to take
Mm,
place. How did you find, again, you're managing many cities, but how did you find
yeah.
that the Chinese cities in particular responded to this when things started to get real, if you would? And did you find that there were protocols that were already in place that made it very easy for you to execute this? Or was it kind of a day by day, we have to adapt to whatever's happening?
Yeah, I mean, China's an interesting one because the shutdown happened over Chinese New Year. So business shuts down every year for all businesses over that time, even manufacturing anyhow. It's like their only annual leave essentially
Mhm.
for a lot of businesses, not ours, but for a lot of factory workers and lower income earners. And everyone is traveling at that time back to their hometowns and whatnot. So China was actually hard for us because when the country was told that no one could leave their house, we couldn't then physically put in particular measures to help. But in the same sense, everyone was, just because it was the start of this situation, no one knew what was happening, everyone was scared. Um, I don't think there was actually anyone was focused on what about my business operations, because during Chinese New Year, they're not. Often for 2 to 3 weeks afterwards, they're still on annual leave or holidays. And then it kind of picks up about 3 weeks after Chinese New Year. So China, from a government management perspective, was really ready to go and strict and enforced it. So that was great, I think, for stopping and reducing the spread of COVID-19. But it meant that we weren't in a position to necessarily implement any disaster recovery solutions or business continuity plan at that time. My management team continued to communicate with us using One Phone, which is basically an app that enables you to take your business phone number and make and receive calls from it as if you're at your desk using a Cisco handset. And we're still available on email, but in terms of business sales, revenue generation, etc., there really wasn't any for us, or I believe for our clients at that time, because it just was not at all a priority. Everyone's health and safety, I think, was the biggest priority then. Whereas now in the rest of Asia, we're kind of every government is dealing with it in a very different way. And it's, even for me, like I look after Southeast Asia and China, and I'm physically at the moment based in Australia. So that's 4 countries plus where I am now, a different legislation and a different timelines in terms of what we can and can't do physically.
Okay, so then let's talk about that as well. If you want to talk about, cities that are more in an advanced stage, if you would, like you said, business as usual, or almost as usual, where percentage of the
Yeah.
companies have returned. How would you kind of place that along the spectrum? Like, who is the furthest along, and then who would you say is
Okay.
kind of slowly coming out of it at this
Yeah,
time?
I'd say in terms of growth in interest and inquiries and tours and customers coming back to use our facilities, probably China is at the other end of that. But no international visa holders or non-permanent or non-Chinese, I think, can come
Yeah.
in
And what about
to the country.
specific cities in China? Are there specific cities that are further ahead than others? Yeah.
Beijing, I think, because it's closest well, it's the capital. I
Mhm.
think they were the first to come out of it, and be very efficient in terms of getting everything back to normal as quickly as possible. I think Shanghai, maybe because it has a lot of uh, workers that come from other parts of China and Wuhan, is a lot stricter in terms of its access. I will say that the building management were great in terms of where we have locations across China, putting measures in place for people's safety and hygiene and communicating those with us very quickly and clearly. So I'd say, and Chengdu was one of the first cities to reopen, but then they introduced checklists in terms of who was coming on and off the floor that we needed to supply to the local bureau. So we opened and then we actually had to close to make sure we had all the documentation chopped and signed that was required.
Mm-hmm.
And Guangzhou is it's very quiet. It's open, but a lot of people are still, if for instance, their tenancy is, somebody has COVID-19 there, then they basically recommend that everyone stays put.
Mm-hmm.
Even though in Australia, like, you would go to work still if there's no government closure, unless you are personally affected or you've personally come in direct contact with someone. So very different ways of managing the situation. And I guess it does vary a little bit from city to city, but I'd say Beijing came back first, and then probably Chengdu and Guangzhou about the same time, but in a much lesser sense in terms of people actually coming in. Like, it was a business as usual in theory, but not. And Shanghai, I think, only now is starting to really pick up, and people going out and feeling a bit safer and more comfortable.
Well, no, that sounds good, and of course it's a very different contrast, I would imagine, to what you're experiencing in Australia as well, because I think you guys are coming out way at the tail end of how the world has kind of responded.
And it's mixed messages. I mean, I suppose if you look at the US as well, it's similar, because all the different states are actually doing it in different ways. And the same thing can be said here from our premiers versus our federal government and prime minister, what we're kind of being instructed to do in response to the health regulations and also bureaucracy. And everyone's a little bit confused and scared and anxious. I guess our policy is we follow the federal government and the health ministry's guidelines. We have the technology in place. Like, I'm in the office at the moment, but I have a video phone set up at home, and I can do everything I usually do in the workplace, and all my team's in Asia, so I'm perfectly placed. I mean, our IT team's got everyone set up with VPNs. Like, we're all ready to go if and when it happens, as we did with Malaysia. The Thai team are all set up, and the Singaporeans as well. So when we have to, we can implement flex workspace for ourselves. But until we need to, I guess, when we have, particularly myself, I have teams in all different stages of this situation. If I'm expecting them to be in the office and customer facing, then I kind of want to show them that I'm doing the same.
Absolutely.
As long as it's within the guidelines that we're given. And of course, we have social distancing here, like 1 person per lift, don't touch anything, 1.5 meters apart. I had my EA in here, but I've kicked her out somewhere, so we have the space. So yeah, we're doing what we need to do. But I think, it's really tough for any company operating in this space, our clients included.
Yeah, so then maybe that's a good way to transition into your community and kind of how you're handling your community right now. Again, I realize that you have a very unique position where you're in a completely different country, and you're experiencing it a little bit differently there than the other countries that you are managing. But can you tell me how you were able to engage with your community during that time? If there was anything surprising about that for you, or if it was pretty much standard how it goes with us kind of talking here on video and people being able to execute their roles and whatnot.
So with our community of clients, it really depends on the country that you're talking about, but we have our Servcorp Home platform. So with Malaysia as a good example, they're still able to update in real time their call handling instructions, any information they need us to pass on to their customers on their behalf if they're unable to take calls. We're still here to accept if the offices are physically open, but they're choosing or not able to come in. We are able to accept courier parcels, meet and greet their clients, do errands, banking, whatever it is, because we're still operational wherever possible. We use the community platform and it's called Servcorp Home, the actual site that we use, which also has a directory, and it's a little bit like LinkedIn where you can post articles. So it can be information pieces on what's going on in your specific market and for your customers. But then they also have a directory listing, which is their contact information and a little bit about their company and what they do. So our clients, we're trying to encourage them to actually use this as a social and a business platform in a period where they maybe are isolated at home, or they need our support to find certain introductions or benefits or leads, which is the most important for any company at this time, through that 60,000 strong global community, and be able to reach each other either through the platform or via their one phone, or however they need us to, or us actually reaching them on their behalf. So that's kind of what we're doing. We've stopped all of our events for safety measures. And yeah, just really trying to look at what we've always had in place, but often haven't focused on nearly enough, and how that can help our customers in this time. With the One Phone app, we're basically offering that for free, whereas it usually had a monthly recurring fee on it, just because we want people to keep their businesses going and be able to receive calls and make calls. Trying to help them with whatever challenges they're facing. I think the biggest challenge for most companies is cash flow. It's overheads. So where we can help them reduce it, you know, if they've had to reduce their team count, for instance, knowing that they still have someone that they can delegate an hour a week to for those urgent requirements to keep it going, rather than having a full-time salary on their hands to deal with, or helping them chase outstanding payments from their clients because that they don't have any cash if their clients aren't paying them, or putting together a marketing database to help in terms of who their target market are, or social content production, whatever it happens to be, that can help them in this time. So yeah, it's
pretty involved. It sounds like you guys are pretty
we're
involved
trying.
in them.
We're trying, yeah. And with the team that are on house arrest at the moment, they do have more time because they're not physically running around after clients. So this is the perfect time for them to actually get on the phone and talk to the customers and the community, and reintroduce that stuff and find out what they're challenged by, and make the most of the time.
Yeah.
We hope that's all we can do.
That sounds great. It sounds like you guys have a lot of work to do. But let's transition to the future, and like when this is all over, what have you guys been discussing, or what do you foresee the lasting effects of this, and what will be carried over into the co-working industry? So whether it be certain protocols that were implemented during this time, or just the way the business will operate moving forward. What do you foresee being like the lasting effects, or anything that changed that might be carried into the future?
I think with the co-working industry in particular, when we're talking about flex space that has the traditional serviced office offering and the virtual office, as well as the co-working product, I think there will be a lot of companies that will actually not survive this, because right now, if you don't have access to physical space for the member, and that's your primary offering, then how can you continue to add value and get them to continue to maintain a membership with you, right? So I think it will be a bit of a reckoning, we saw it a little bit with what happened with WeWork towards the end of last year. And I think based on comparative pricing, people are quite desperate to get whatever they can in, even if it's lower than cost right now in the market, just to keep afloat, because we've reached out to our landlords for rent incentives to pass on to our clients, and the majority of them have given very little, to be honest, and whatever we will get, we would pass on. And I imagine it's the same over in our industry. So I think moving forward, it will see a lot go out of business and the strongest survive. I think though in certain countries you don't have access and people are scared of a shared work environment at the moment, we're just making sure in our regions that we are able to implement and I'd say a lot of co-working spaces may be challenged by this, although some of them have huge spaces, so maybe not, but making sure they have the 1.5 minimum meters apart from each workspace for the social distancing. So maybe you'll find that the head count or number of memberships to space will have to go down, or at least in the near future, for the ones that come out of this. I also think that a lot of companies who are in traditional real estate will also move towards a co-working, or at least a flexible leasing option, to reduce their risk, their capital expenditure, to be more flexible. I think once companies reduce headcount and find they can work from home with a variety of solutions, they will, implement that. And the whole nature of shared workspace will change over time, which was already happening because of WeWork and how successful a growth model they were in attracting the big multinationals in particular. So, I mean, even in the midst of this, for Singapore, for example, we've had a really great sales month in serviced office, not so much co-working, but part of that is that there's split workspace requirements. So people are having their work teams, and some will work from their traditional space and some will work from a co-working solution, because working from home doesn't always work, right? If you've got kids or dogs or flatmates, whatever, or your internet's insufficient. So what they're doing is leveraging their bets. So if somebody from team A comes down with COVID and they need to isolate those team for 14 days, then they've got team B, essentially. So that's how co-working is actually working in this situation as a shared space. And I think that as they get used to that experience, that it may continue despite COVID, hopefully this pandemic ending. So yeah, it's a very interesting time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is sad to hear that some of the players will, maybe not make it through this. But with that being said, do you have any advice for other people who are in the industry, other leaders and people that are going through this? Or I guess kind of shifting into a place where the cities that you're in charge of were about maybe a month or a month and a half ago. So something that maybe they can prepare for, or anything you want to leave us with. Yeah.
I think just finding out what you can do to help your community, like genuinely help them through this, because without our members, there's no business for anyone at the end of the day. Really having a look at, as this has trended and continued in different regions, what measures were implemented that helped reduce the risk and increase people's surety of coming into the spaces, like making sure that you have adequate space between members for social distancing, hygiene measures in place, and sharing those with your members. Whatever technology platform you have in place and team, that becomes a good focus wherever possible. And being prepared, like if your physical space does go into lockdown because of the government regulations, and it has to, what is your next plan? Like having something in place ahead of time, whether it be a pause to your memberships with a confirmed restart time, like you kind of push it forward for your members, or adding value in other ways, or if you have locations you'll be able to keep open as backup plans. I don't know. It just really depends on the nature of the business, how many locations they have, where they're based, what they can implement. But I think constant communication is really, really important, and also making sure you're looking after your staff and keeping them calm when they're on the front line. It's all good and well from a head office to be like, come on guys, everyone's overreacting or whatever, and we've got to be there, because if we're not in the business helping people, bringing in revenue, then that's it for a lot of companies, as I said.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So finding ways to keep it going.
Yeah, I think there's a fine line, especially in the co-working industry, because there is such a community perspective, all these different companies working together. And then at the end of the day, they are people, but the driving factor is revenue. So there is a very fine line to keep that balance and keep your priorities straight. So I think that is a common theme of the discussions that I have been having. But with that being said, and I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. It's really valuable information, especially with your geographical location and your insights. I'd love to keep in touch with you and follow you guys on your journey. And yeah, we'll talk to you again soon, and enjoy the rest of your evening. And this is my morning.
Enjoy your day.
I'm gonna have a coffee now to get mine started. So thanks so much again.
My pleasure, Erin. Have a great one.
Bye. You as well. Bye-bye.